Nathan Steele was not the kind of CEO who hesitated. He built Steele Tech Industries from the ground up with ruthless precision, turning a struggling manufacturing company into a billion-dollar empire. Efficiency, discipline, and absolute control were the foundations of his success. When complaints about toxic management and abusive supervisors started reaching his executive team, he dismissed them as excuses from weak employees. If they don't like it, they can leave. But when Steel Tech's turnover rate skyrocketed and productivity plummeted, his board members started pressuring him to act. "Your company is bleeding workers, Nathan," his COO warned. "We can't keep ignoring this. People are leaving in droves because of management, not the work itself." Nathan wasn't convinced. He believed his managers were the backbone of the company, the enforcers who kept lazy employees in check. So instead of launching an internal review, he made a different choice. He would go undercover. Disguised as a new hire, Nathan planned to expose the so-called oppression as overblown nonsense. He expected to find slackers, complainers, and ungrateful employees. What he found instead? A nightmare of his own making. Because the real villains weren't the workers. They were the managers he had trusted the most. And by the time he realized it, he was already their next target. Will Nathan survive the ruthless management system he created, or will he become their next victim? Comment below, what do you think is worse, bad employees or toxic managers? And if you love shocking twists and intense undercover stories, make sure to like this video. Subscribe for more insane workplace stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Now let's dive into the chaos. Nathan Steele had never worked a day in the trenches of his own company. He had built Steel Tech Industries from a struggling manufacturing firm into a multi-billion-dollar empire. He had hired the best managers, implemented cutting-edge efficiency strategies, and ensured that his workers were paid competitively, by industry standards at least. So when employees started quitting in record numbers, citing toxic management, abusive supervisors, and impossible quotas, Nathan dismissed it as whining from the weak. If they don't like it, they can leave. That had been his motto for years, and it worked until it didn't. Now, with departments short-staffed and productivity plummeting, his board members were pressuring him to act. "Your company is bleeding workers, Nathan," his COO, Mark Holloway, warned. "If we don't figure out why, we're going to have bigger problems than a few bad reviews on Glassdoor." Nathan smirked. Glassdoor isn't real life. The people who quit were lazy. The strong ones stayed. Mark shook his head. "Nathan, listen to me. People aren't quitting because of the work. They're quitting because of management. You've given your supervisors too much power and they're abusing it." Nathan leaned back, folding his arms. "Prove it." Mark exhaled sharply. "How about you see it for yourself?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" Mark held his gaze. "Go undercover." Silence filled the boardroom. Nathan scoffed. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Mark challenged. "You think the complaints are exaggerated, so prove it. Work as a regular employee for 2 weeks. No special treatment. No one will know who you are." Nathan smirked, leaning forward. "And if I do?" Mark didn't hesitate. "Then I'll back off about the management issues." Nathan considered it. On the surface, it seemed like an easy win. 2 weeks pretending to be a worker, proving that everything was fine, and shutting down the complaints once and for all. "Fine," he said, "I'll do it." And with that, the plan was set. A week later, Nathan Steele ceased to exist. In his place stood Nate Sullivan, a supposedly new hire in Steel Tech's main production facility. Dressed in steel-toe boots, a cheap uniform, and a company-issued hard hat, Nathan looked like every other worker in the warehouse. No more tailored suits, luxury office, or private driver. For the first time in his life, he was invisible. Or so he thought. The moment he entered the warehouse, the air felt different. There was no greeting from supervisors. No one introduced themselves. People moved like ghosts, their eyes dull, their movements mechanical. Nathan frowned. Where was the energy, the efficiency, the teamwork? He was about to find out. A stocky man in his 40s, grizzled, bald, and carrying a clipboard, stalked over. His name tag read Foreman, Doug Wallace. Doug looked Nate up and down. "You're the new guy." "Yeah," Nathan said. Doug scoffed. "Let's see how long you last." Nathan narrowed his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" Doug smirked. "It means don't slow us down, rookie, and don't expect any hand-holding." Nathan clenched his jaw. This was his company. He had personally approved the training programs. And yet there was no training. Instead, Doug threw a checklist at him. "Memorize it. You've got 5 minutes." Nathan looked at the paper. It was a set of complex assembly line tasks. "Wait, shouldn't there be an orientation or—" Doug snorted. "This ain't corporate, rookie. We don't waste time on babysitting. Get moving." Nathan felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't how things were supposed to run. But before he could question it, the first siren blared and the conveyor belt roared to life. And suddenly, Nathan had no choice but to keep up. By hour 2, his muscles ached. By hour 4, sweat poured down his back. By the end of the shift, he was drenched, exhausted, and 2 steps away from collapsing. The work was relentless. The belt never stopped. And the worst part, Doug was watching him like a hawk. Whenever Nathan slowed down, even for a second, Doug was there. "Move faster, rookie. You think this is nap time. Jesus Christ, even the temps are better than you." Nathan had never been spoken to like this in his life. But he gritted his teeth and kept going. Because this was his system. And if others could handle it, then so could he. Right. On day 3, he realized he was wrong. The first sign, the injuries. He saw a worker, a guy named Carlos, cut his hand open on a defective machine. Nathan expected someone to pause the line and get medical help. Instead, Doug yanked Carlos aside. "You clock out now, you don't get paid for the rest of the shift," Doug snapped. Carlos, bleeding, wincing, wrapped his hand in a dirty rag and went back to work. Nathan felt his stomach twist. "This isn't safe," he muttered. Doug turned to him, smirking. "Welcome to Steele Tech, rookie." Nathan clenched his fists. This wasn't how he had built this company. Was it? By day 6, he had seen enough. Workers were pushed past their limits. Machines were run into the ground with no maintenance. Supervisors ruled with fear, threatening, berating, and punishing workers for slowing down. And worst of all, Doug had his own little empire. He forced employees to work unpaid overtime. He falsified performance reports to fire people he didn't like. He took kickbacks from vendors, overcharging Steele Tech for supplies. Nathan felt rage building in his chest. He had come here expecting to expose lazy workers. Instead, he had found a corrupt system run by his own managers. And the more he tried to push back, the worse things got. Because Doug had noticed him. And now, Nathan was his next target. On day 8, it happened. Doug called Nathan into his office, a small, windowless room with a single chair. Doug leaned back, smirking. "You don't belong here, rookie." Nathan kept his face neutral. I don't know what you're talking about. Doug chuckled. Yeah, you do. You ask too many questions. You think you're better than the rest of us. Nathan stayed silent. Doug stood, circling him like a predator. You got two options, he said. Either you shut up and do what you're told. He leaned in. Or I make sure you don't last the week. Nathan's pulse pounded. Was this a threat? Before he could react, Doug smirked and clapped him on the shoulder. Think about it, rookie. Nathan gritted his teeth. Doug thought he had all the power, that he could bully and manipulate whoever he wanted. But Doug had made one big mistake. Because Nathan wasn't just another worker. He was the CIO. And no, he wasn't just going to fire Doug. He was going to burn his entire empire to the ground. Nathan sat at his workstation, his muscles aching from days of relentless labor, but his mind was sharper than ever. Doug had made his move, threatening him, cornering him, trying to break him. It had worked on everyone else. But Doug had no idea who he was really dealing with. Nathan wasn't just some low-level worker trying to survive the factory floor. He was the man who owned it. And now, he was done playing along. That night he stayed late. Not because he had to, but because he had a plan. With the warehouse nearly empty, he made his way toward Doug's office. Over the past week, he had observed every dirty trick Doug had pulled. The bribes, the intimidation, the illegal overtime, all of it was hidden somewhere. Nathan needed proof. He had to be quick. The last thing he needed was for someone, especially Doug, to catch him snooping. As he sifted through the mess of paperwork on Doug's desk, he found what he was looking for. A ledger. The numbers were cooked. Nathan recognized it instantly. Falsified reports, missing inventory, payroll adjustments that conveniently skimmed off worker bonuses and overtime pay. Nathan's blood boiled. He knew corporate fraud when he saw it. Doug wasn't just a bad boss. He was a criminal. Nathan quickly snapped photos of the evidence with his phone. This was enough to fire him on the spot, enough to report him to the authorities. But then he heard footsteps. Getting louder. Closer. His stomach dropped. Someone was coming. Nathan barely had time to shove the ledger back into place before the door swung open. Doug stood there, arms crossed, his eyes dark with suspicion. What the hell are you doing in my office, rookie? Nathan forced himself to stay calm. Just looking for some paperwork, he said casually. Doug narrowed his eyes. Since when do new hires handle paperwork? Nathan needed to get out fast. Since my supervisor told me to, he lied. Doug smirked. Nice try. He stepped closer, his presence suffocating. You know, Doug said slowly, I was thinking about what I said earlier, about making sure you don't last the week. Nathan's pulse pounded. Doug tilted his head. It'd be real easy to lose your file, rookie. You'd be gone before HR even noticed. Nathan clenched his fists. Doug thought he was untouchable, that his position as foreman made him immune. But he wasn't the only one with power. Nathan squared his shoulders. You know what, Doug, he said evenly. I was thinking about what you said too. Doug raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah, and what's that? Nathan smirked. That you're a dead man walking. And with that, he walked out. Doug had no idea what was coming for him. The next morning, Nathan was called into the general manager's office. Not just any manager, Elliot Greer, the highest-ranking supervisor in the facility. Nathan entered to find Doug already there, smirking like he had already won. Elliot gestured for him to sit. Doug leaned forward. "This guy," he said, nodding toward Nathan, "has been slacking, complaining, making excuses. He's not cut out for this job." Nathan clenched his jaw. This was a setup. Doug had gone on the offensive, trying to eliminate him before he could strike first. Nathan took a deep breath. It was time to end this. He pulled out his phone. "You know, Elliot," he said, his tone casual, "before you fire me, you might want to check this out." He placed the phone on the desk and pressed play. Doug's face paled. Because there, in crystal clear audio, was a recording of him threatening Nathan the night before. The room fell silent. Then Nathan dropped the final bombshell. "Doug here has also been skimming money from the company. I have the proof." Elliot turned slowly to Doug, his expression cold. Doug stammered, looking from Nathan to Elliot. This is ridiculous. He's lying." Nathan stood, rolling his shoulders. "Yeah, then I guess you won't mind if we call corporate and check the books, right?" Doug's mouth opened and closed. For the first time, he had nothing to say. And Nathan. He had never felt more satisfied in his life. Doug Wallace was escorted off the premises within the hour. The moment it happened, the atmosphere in the warehouse changed. People whispered, glancing at Nathan like he had pulled off the impossible. Because he had. Doug had ruled this place with an iron fist for years. And now, he was gone. And Nathan wasn't finished yet. When the undercover experiment ended, Nathan didn't return to his luxury office. Instead, he called an emergency meeting with Steele Tech's leadership. He laid everything out. The broken system, the abusive managers, the workers forced into unpaid overtime. He showed them proof. And then he made changes. Supervisors were held accountable, no more unchecked power. Mandatory training was reinstated, no more throwing employees onto the floor with no preparation. Overtime pay was enforced, no more stealing wages. Anonymous worker surveys were implemented, no more silencing complaints. Nathan had come into this experiment thinking his employees were the problem. But now he realized something else. The problem had been his own leadership all along. And for the first time, he was actually lighting. 1 month later, Nathan walked the warehouse floor again. This time not as a worker, as their CEO. But something had changed. People didn't look scared anymore. They didn't look defeated. For the first time, they looked like they actually wanted to be here. Nathan found Carlos, the guy who had cut his hand during Nathan's first week. "How's the new safety system working?" Nathan asked. Carlos smirked. "You tell me, boss, you paid for it." Nathan chuckled. "Fair enough." Carlos hesitated, then stuck out his hand. Nathan shook it. "Never thought I'd say this," Carlos said, "but you're not as bad as I thought." Nathan grinned. "Don't get used to it." But deep down, he knew he wasn't the same man he had been before. When that was the real victory. Nathan Steele walked into his own company, believing that his workers were the problem, that the complaints about toxic management were just excuses from lazy employees. But after 2 weeks in the trenches, he realized the real problem was the very system he created. His own managers were abusing their power, stealing wages, and punishing hard workers just to maintain control. And when they tried to fire him, he knew one thing: he had to take his company back. By the end of it, Nathan didn't just fix Steele Tech, he became a leader worth following. What do you think? Would you ever trust Nathan after everything he did? Let us know in the comments below. And if you love shocking workplace stories with unexpected twists, make sure to like this video. Subscribe for more insane undercover boss stories. Comment below, have you ever had a terrible manager? Tell us your worst experience. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.